The time and joining us in today's session. Today's session is led by Build Change, entitled Increasing Access to Climate Resilient Housing for Vulnerable Populations, Shifting Power Through Affordable Financing. Together with me are three of my colleagues who will deep dive more on how we're doing things here in Build Change and providing more access to climate resilient housing in emerging nations. But before we further proceed and discuss more on that, I'd like to introduce who Build Change is first. Build Change is a nonprofit social innovator who is uh, who is an expert in providing or increasing access of climate and resilient housing for emerging nations. Since our founding in 2004, we have safeguarded more than 4.7 billion in housing infrastructure assets and building new or retrofitting more than 220 buildings and improving the safety and security of over 1.17 million people across Latin America, the Caribbean, and Asia and Pacific. In Build Change, we partner with different stakeholders, such as the government, microfinances, other financing institutions, other NGOs and CSOs to deliver and provide access for climate resilient housing to the low income and middle income households. Everyone should have access to safer and resilient houses. It should be evident that everyone should have these so that their families are protected and they grow in a safe and secure environment. But the truth is, not everyone has this opportunity. According to UN Habitat, by 2030, uh, 3 billion people, which is equivalent to 40% of world's total population, will be living in substandard houses or housing. And with that, the investment for better, safer, and more equitable housing is or has to be prioritized so we can save everyone and improve everyone's living condition. Another thing is that our population has exponentially increased over the years. And in some instances, the government struggles to address housing backlogs, which poses problems and poses threats to everyone. So this leads to more informal construction of buildings or of houses. But what is an informally constructed house? An informally constructed house is typically a house that is vulnerable to hazards. It is not made with the help of licensed engineers and architects. They are structurally deficient, and they usually lack habitability requirements such as access to water, electricity, hygiene, sanitation, and more. And with this, they pose greater threats for people living inside of it to more hazards and more danger. But in Build Change, we believe that disasters don't kill people. It's the poorly made buildings who do. So if we direct our efforts, if we direct all our initiatives towards strengthening or improving houses, then we can save more lives and therefore we can improve how they live. So, what is a resilient housing? Before we really understand or grasp the idea of what a resilient housing is, I believe we have to understand what safe housing is first. A safe house is a house that is built in accordance or in compliance with certain rules and standards. But there is no global standard for safer housing. The standards are locally set, so it depends on the planning, design, and one's way of construction. In Build Change, we believe that a safe housing can be achieved by following three major steps. Number one, it's very important that you comply with the rules and standards set locally or in your community. Number two is you have to reduce your exposure to hazards by relocation if possible. And number three is by doing or investing in improving the some elements, structural elements in your houses to minimize the dangers and improve the structure's performance against natural hazards. So by that, resilient housing exceeds and fulfills all this, and in several ways more. A resilient housing provides a safer, more secure, healthier space for its inhabitants. It is it is a secure financial investment and affordable one. And also, most of the projects who are into resilient housing proves that it is scalable, sustainable, and uh, adaptable. Throughout our journey in implementing programs and projects for climate resilient housing, we were able to come up with this theory of change. This theory of change helps build change address the housing gap in the market. So it simply means that there are barriers that we need to overcome, and these barriers are the people, money, and technology. So people should want to live in a safe house. They should be able to understand the risks and the vulnerabilities that they are susceptible to, hence driving demand for resilient houses. Next is money. Money means that people should have access to enough financing so people would build more resilient houses, because if they don't, then they will just not build resilient and safe houses. The government should also incentivize and provide subsidies to encourage more people to build and develop programs towards building resilient housing initiatives. And lastly, technology. Technology should be locally available, it should be cost competitive, and it should be culturally accepted. We can leverage in digital innovation in helping us scale up these projects. So overcoming these barriers will help us into the adoption of resilient housing for the communities. In Build Change, we advocate for improving existing houses. We advocate for strengthening existing houses because it has proven many benefits. And improving houses through simple solutions and tried and tested methodologies that already exist is possible. Since our project in Haiti, we have taken the context of retrofitting to prevention and mitigation, where we did some projects in the Philippines, Indonesia, Colombia, and others, so we can better improve people's way of life. Aside from providing safer, more decent, and a healthier environment for its occupants, resilient housing is also cost efficient. According to a study that we have launched, that Build Change have launched, uh, building or strengthening or improving a house is 23% more cost efficient than building a new one. So it uses less materials, uses less construction materials, which is just 20%. Another thing is that retrofitting or improving houses is more environment friendly. It reduces impacts on the environment because if you will read or scan through the QR on your screen, you will be directed to the recently released study made by Build Change about saving carbon. So according to the study, retrofitting is cheaper and can save up to 18 metric tons of carbon emission per house. On a global scale, we estimate that there is an opportunity to save 4.8 gigatons of carbon emission while addressing more than 268 million inadequate housing globally and saving lives. So in a nutshell, that's what Build Change does. So we try to advocate and promote for resilient housing so that everyone can have access to it. And so we can save more lives and improve more on their way of living. To get to know more about what we do and how we do things, our next speaker is my colleague Leva Shrestha. She is currently in Nepal and set to do pilot project to understand the environment and the need of the market for disaster resilient and climate resilient housing program. Over to you, Leva.
Thank you so much, Marvin. Good morning, everyone. My presentation today will be, as Marvin mentioned, how we are working in Nepal to make resilient housing more accessible to the vulnerable people. And I will be talking about our approaches to, on how we get to what we want to achieve. Next, please. So Nepal is a small country. It's adorned by these beautiful Himalayan mountain ranges, as you can see in the picture. However, this beauty comes at a price. The Himalayan region is one of the most seismically active places on Earth, and Nepal has a long history of destructive earthquakes. According to a study by UNDP, Nepal ranks 11th in the global earthquake risk and 4th in the global climate risk index. Next, please. So as you all may have already known, in 2015, a massive earthquake struck Nepal, and in the aftermath, more than 10 million houses were damaged, and about 3.5 million people were rendered homeless. And when we look at the housing stock that was affected, if you look at the picture, the map here, about 74% of the housing affected were of rural typology. Now, if you look at the map, the circles that you see are data on the damaged buildings and it represents like all different districts in Nepal. If you look at the green color ones are the ones that have a rural typology. So when I say rural typology, it means these like mud-based houses. And in Nepal, it is estimated that more than 95% of the houses are non-engineered. So it was not designed by engineers. It was designed by, it was constructed using local practices, traditional practices. Next, please. So again, this is a picture of a typical rural municipality. As you can see, most of the houses are very similar typology. Next, please. And these traditional houses are typically 2.5 stories, like 2 stories plus an attic at the top. They have wooden floors and they have wooden pillars supporting the floor, and the roof is typically made of wood. And traditionally, the roofing cover is clay tiles, but although these days CGI is more popular alternative to that. Next, please. Now, according to a very rapid visual survey carried out by the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Authority in Nepal, and they carried out this assessment on more than 10,000 buildings across 13 districts in Nepal. It was found that more than 90% of the houses were vulnerable to earthquakes and needed some form of intervention. Now, if this is the case for public buildings, we can, expect the situation, to be even worse for private housing. Next. Next, please. So we believe that our resilient housing program, we usually design that to be implemented in a 6-step value chain. And at each step of the value chain, the focus is on optimizing resources where possible and to maximize the effectiveness of the program. Next, please. Now, for us to be able to do that, before working on any location, it is always vital for us to obtain the information about the disaster and its effect on the housing stock. Now, in case of post-disaster situations, the nature of damages in the building stock will always gives a very good indication of the vulnerabilities that existed in that sort of typology, and it gives a good understanding of why these buildings collapse. Now, this is vital information for engineers and technical people, as it gives them clues on how to design a safe building or to design a strengthening scheme for these type of buildings. Now, however, like before designing the housing interventions, we always carry out a housing subsector study and this study looks at prevalent housing typologies. What are the typologies that are prevalent in that location? Typical configuration of these housing typologies and layout of buildings. And then common architectural and cultural preferences in the location, construction materials used, and then what materials are available locally. The study also looks at the skill level of local builders and common construction practices in the area. Next, please. Now, before we started working in Betanchuk municipality, that's the municipality that we're currently working on. As part of the information collection, we interviewed more than 150 homeowners in that location, and we found that about 60%, 65% of the homeowners already knew about retrofitting, and they had seen a retrofit being done after the earthquake. Now, retrofitting is a new information in these locations, and they've seen a retrofitting, but it's the retrofitting that happened after the Gorkha earthquake. Next, please. Now, we also found that 43% of the homeowners would want to build a full retrofit if given a chance, whereas a very small percentage of the homeowners thought that simple repairing such as plastering their house is enough for them. Next, please. However, when asked about how much money they are willing to invest in their traditional house, most of the homeowners did not want to invest more than $3,000. Now, a typical retrofit would cost around $6,000 to $7,000. And most of the homeowners needed to take loan if they were to retrofit their houses, whereas only about 11% of the homeowners said that they could afford, or they could afford resources to do the strengthening with their own savings. Next, please. Now, we also interviewed microfinance institutions in the municipality, and we found that 4 out of 7 MFIs were providing collateral-free loans if the loans were less than $2,200. The average interest rate that they charge is 15% per annum, and they expect a monthly repayment scheme. And to be eligible for this collateral-free loan, the applicant should be a member of the MFI for a minimum of 3 months. Next, please. Now, we also interviewed builders and found that 50% of the builders had an experience about 7 years, whereas only 35% of the builders surveyed had any experience working on retrofitting. Next, please. Now, once the necessary information is collected, then we move on to design the awareness raising campaign for safer housing. Now, we implemented the awareness raising trainings to homeowners, and we did that in collaboration with the microfinance partners, because these MFIs, they have regular capacity building initiatives that's done for their members, and we attach this awareness building campaign to their capacity building initiative. And this was done mostly to create demand for home strengthening. And the awareness program conveyed, sort of information on why home strengthening is necessary and how it can be achieved, how it can be affordable. Next, please. Now, in an effort to make resilient housing accessible and affordable, we sort of had to eliminate the cost of hiring an engineer for the design process. So under the design element of the value chain, we work on how we can make this engineering cost lesser for the homeowners. Because a homeowner in a rural district would never be able to afford or to pay for engineering services. So hence we used the library of architectural and structural designs we had accumulated during the earthquake reconstruction phase. So due to our different reconstruction programs, we had a collection of designs, and we use these designs to sort of provide ready-made designs to the homeowners as per their demand. So that means that we eliminated the cost of the design time for an engineer. Next, please. Now, in the case of homeowners who already had an existing but damaged or vulnerable house, we promoted home strengthening measures based on a type design. So a type design is a ready-made sort of home strengthening design that can be readily used for a building that met a predefined list of criteria. This type design cut the design time by many folds, and has the potential of being operated by a non-tech person, such as an MFO as well. So we can see how much cost is saved here in terms of engineering time. Next, please. The next step of the value chain is finance. And as we found out during the information collection phase, most homeowners had to combine personal savings and then loan from MFIs. Now, the first few houses that we supported received some grant support from Bill Change. Typically in a post-disaster situation, there are government grants that are available that would also cover part of the home strengthening costs. New construction can be made more affordable by recommending to build like a stronger, smaller core house and in the first, and then having already provisions for them to expand vertically or horizontally as they come onto more money. And then for retrofitting, retrofitting we can be made more affordable by allowing it to happen in incremental fashion. So not doing everything at once, but doing a few things at a time. Each increments are then designed to cost less than $2,200 so that the homeowners can access the collateral-free loans that's available for that amount of money. Next, please. Now, the next step is the build step. Now, before the actual construction work starts, we implement our capacity building activities. One is to train homeowners so they know how to manage the construction site. And the next is to train builders to teach them how to carry out retrofitting works. This is usually done in the form of on-the-job trainings. The result is that a house, they have a retrofitted house for demonstration, as well as they have a bunch of trainers, bunch of builders that are already trained and available to work in the community. Next, please. Now, here are just a few examples of retrofits that we've done. This one is done in Sindhupalchok in a village called Eklefat. Next, please. This is another house in Sangja, Putali Bazar. Next, please. This is another house again, before and after, for a house we did in Kavre. Next, please. This is again another house in Kavre. This house was near to a marketplace. So as soon as they retrofitted the house, a bank sort of rented out the space. So the homeowner was very happy. Next, please. Now, so we come back to the question of how can we make achieving sustainable and safe housing at scale. Now, first and foremost, we need to make engineering solutions simple to use and accessible to technical as well as non-technical people, such as the homeowners or the builders or the MFI loan officers even. Now, we need to empower homeowners to have them take the driver's seat for a housing solution to be sustainable. So we very much advocate for homeowner-driven construction. And then we must increase the access to financing for constructing safe houses through MFI partnership, providing resilient home loans. We need to make the technologies more affordable by efficient designs, but also by providing incremental approach to reach the safe housing standard. But we also need to reduce the cost of engineering services, by being innovative in using technology and other tools to be more efficient in terms of delivering our services. And most important of all, I think we need to prevent the disasters by making the houses safe. Thank you so much. And back to you, Marvin.
Yeah, thank you so much, Leva, for that very insightful presentation. It's really very important that we do pilot projects just so we test the market and see what the needs, wants, preferences are. So thank you very much, Leva. To everyone who joined us this morning, if you have questions, please type them in over the chat box, and we will try our best to answer them at the end of the presentation. At the end of the session, we'll be opening a question and answer, and then we'll be able to address all your questions there. So next of the presentation, next is Annie Triani. She's the country program director for Indonesia. They are now set to implement some of the tools and resources that they have developed with their partners. So Annie, can you please tell us more about this?
Thank you, Marvin. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our session. So I would like to share with all of you with regards to the pilotings that we currently doing in Indonesia for the climate and disaster resilient home financing. Next. Okay, so just quickly put the context about Indonesia, that we know that the substandard housing is everywhere in globally, and Indonesia especially, that there are about 20% out of the whole housing stock are substandard, and around nearly 2/3 of those housing stocks are self-built or informal housing and owned by low-income households. And we also know that Indonesia has a lot of multiple disaster risks, and over like nearly 40% of them of the area are located in the areas at extremely high or high risk of earthquakes. And the right technical and financial assistance is not reaching this household in this informal settlement. Next, Maureen. Okay. And so, as what have been explained by my colleague Marvin and Liva on the philosophy that we use in our work, is we optimize three framework: people, money, and technology. Because for people, we would like to emphasize that people must have the financial means for the money, but also the first one is that people has to have one housing to be safe and healthy and resilient. So someone has to create demand for resilient housing. And then the last one is the technology, and how do we build with resilience in mind? How do we use the best engineering expertise to ensure that housing is safe? And how do we use technology for scaling? So next. And so there are some examples that we currently doing and we have been doing in Indonesia in terms of people component. So we're targeting mostly working with the government or supporting the World Bank to work with the National Housing Subsidy Program and the Ministry of Housing. So we help them to develop and evaluate the existing National Housing Subsidy Program. We try to see what kind of gaps that they have in terms of integrating any disaster risk reduction elements into their housing programs. And then we also help to develop some guidelines on how to assess a building if it's seismic resistant enough, and what to do once we found any deficiencies. And in terms of the next one, so in terms of financing, we also try to make sure that the people must have the financial means to strengthen and improve homes. And this requires wider access to affordable financing options for homeowners, and in particular for low-income families and government support in the country. And so at the moment, which this is the core of the presentation, is that we are started to pilot a resilient home financing program, and we currently partnering with Komida, Koperasi Mitra Duafa, which they have 100% women as a members, and to support their existing home renovation loan product. The next one. Okay, so this is the basis that we use when we started to implement the pilot and planning and implement the pilot. So what we do is that we started with assessment. We started to see and collect data, what kind of building typology or housing typology that the members currently living, and what kind of material preferences, design preferences, occupancy, like number of occupants, how they use the house in terms of day and night, whether they use it as a business or just for living space. And then also identify the hazard risks such as flooding, earthquake, if it's in a tsunami zone, whether it's a landslide, and as well as assess the typical refinancing that the cooperative provide for home improvement. And then the second step is to share the findings to the MFI partners, in this case is Komida, So what kind of preferences that the member like to have in their house, what kind of improvement they like to do. And then based on that, once we analyze together with Comida or MFI partner with regards to the preferences and the demand as well as the financing aspect in the typical payment and typical financing of the cooperative, and then we started to design the solution. We started to see, okay, what the people needs and what the MFI partner needs. So for instance, we know that most financial institutions do not have construction related expert, either architects or engineers or any construction working related experience. And that's why we help to, Biogens help to first build the comprehensive technical assistance toolkit. And that includes how to do home assessment by non-technical people, so which is for the MFI loan officer as well as for homeowners and builders. And then once they got the result of the home assessment, then they will formulate together with the MFI or the cooperative. So what is the most suitable solution to improve the house based on the house vulnerabilities as well as the financing and payment capacity. And after that, once we started to formulate the financing scheme, which in this case, for the piloting, we have make a combination between loan and subsidy in order to test some of the techniques. And then we started to deliver the pilot and the product prototype and started to test the quality and started to test the acceptance and any gaps during the pilot. And then the last one is evaluate. Then the next one, Marvin. And so this is an example on what are the technical assistance toolkit that we develop. So we develop a mobile-based and web-based tool that it could help a loan officer as well as homeowners and builders to do rapid evaluation of existing structural home conditions. And so that includes also assessing the location, what kind of a hazard risk that they have in the location that the house being built at the moment. And then after that, within a minute, it will come with a rapid report of assessment and then a design solution as well as design costs based on the selected payment capacity. And then we also help the MFI partner to build together the construction manual so that the builders that being appointed by the members or the homeowners will be able to use it. And then as part of the people component that we have emphasized earlier, that we need to maintain the demand, or we need always maintain a party or someone that want to have a safe house. So that's why we say it is important to also prepare a training module and training resources and deliver the training to the homeowners and on why it is important. And then the next one, so the key user of this toolkit for the technical assistance, mostly for MFI in Indonesia case for Comida, is going to be loan officer. And then they're going to assist each of their members that are interested to apply for home improvement loan to assess the house and then discuss together with the builders what kind of improvement could be made. And then the scope of the toolkit is also the house assessment, scope of work, bill of quantity, and things like that. And then it's also include the loan utilization checklist, which to ensure that the financing or the loan being provided by the MFI would be able to deliver the quality construction according to the initial plan. So the next one, this is where why I mentioned previously that it is always important to aiming for behavioral changing or a good decision making in our program, because we always wanted to, because technology can be, or technique in building good construction can always be taught, and people can always understand that to many of the resources. However, if there's no willingness or there's no awareness and that's something like a leading to real act or actual act to really want to improve their house, then it's going to be hinder the progress of improving the housing quality. So we always put the demand stimulation as the on top of our approach. So we always started with not how to build, but started with why. Why is it important to make home resilient? Why is it important to make our families safer during earthquakes or during a strong wind and during flooding and things like that? And so we assist Comida or our MFI partner to deliver some awareness raising and discussion with the homeowners. And then the next slide is, so this is an example on how we try to tailor some of the marketing materials, because we know that in Indonesia, there are quite a variety of building preferences, material preferences, and construction skill differences. And so that's why in each of the branch of the MFI or MFI partner, we always try to fit into what is locally being preferred by the members in terms of construction materials and construction techniques. And then the next one, in terms of financing side, so then, as I mentioned, that we have developed the home assessment tool, and then the homeowners or the members will be able to select what kind of design that they think they would able to do with the current financing capacity that they have. And then if you could see on the screen that there are some options, including the price or costing, that so that the homeowner could pick any or each of them or all of them that according to what they think they would like to do. And then it also, once they click the design option, it's gonna come up with a scope of work with a list of work that needs to be done based on their selections, and then including the costs. And then the next one, so then the homeowners also have option to do what kind of loan package they would like to see. So there are some auto-generate and custom loan package, which auto-generate is something that the homeowner could put some certain numbers. If you see on the left image, that the homeowner could like somehow put some number that fit into their saving or their financing that they have now. And then the solution will give some option that within their financing capacity. Or other than that, they could use also custom loan packages where they could select by themselves any action items they would like to do. And then the next one, so this is an example of before this being retrofitted and after being improved. And so the key resilience that being made is that so a quick story that this house has received a government subsidy to improve the house, but unfortunately the financing may not be enough, and so that's why there's a lot of missing columns internally, and as well as they have a heavy roof materials, and they have a heavy gable wall, if you see on the left, on just below the roof. And then after some consideration, the homeowner decided that they want to change few things so that the house could be a lot safer. So they installing some columns, they replace some the heavy roof materials to be the lighter one, and improve some connection to the roof and to the beam and to column and to the wall. And the next one, so I guess this is the last my last slide of presentation. So I'd like to close our presentation with a story. Since Indonesia was the first country where Bilgens operated, and we're going to celebrate the 20 years of Bilgens today, this year. So Bilgens is always start with the people. So I want to share some story of one of the many mothers we work with. So including Eva. So Eva lives in Padang, West Sumatra. She experienced two major earthquakes, which left her concerned for how to keep her family safe, especially her 2 years old daughter. So Eva told us about her experience, and she was incredibly scared because her baby was alone in the bedroom, and reaching her was difficult when earthquake happened, as she couldn't even stand. So she crawled to reach the baby and left her house safely. But her family house were damaged, and that's why our family only option was just to keep making repairs by themselves the best they could. So Bilchins come and we provided together the technical assistant work with Eva and what kind of houses that and improvement that he would like to do, she would like to do. And so, yeah, I guess through this, we would like to emphasize that this is an important, it is important to make people where they are on the ground with simple, safe design, easy quality control procedure, and access to subsidies or loan. I guess that's all on for Indonesia. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Annie, for that presentation. Yeah, I think it's what I want to try to say right now is that we are very much excited to see what's going to happen after after the implementation of your project. So we'll definitely keep an eye on that. Again, if any one of you in the Zoom, if you have any questions for Liva and Annie or myself, you can please send them in via the chat box and we'll go through them after the presentation. We'll open a question and answer segment and then we'll try to address as much questions as we can. So next presenter that we have for today is another colleague of mine. She is Verdi Lopez, the country programs manager in the Philippines. In the Philippines, it's very interesting to note that they've already started the scale up, and right now they are navigating through it with their partners. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you Verdi Lopez, who will be sharing more about the Philippine Country Program. Verdi?
Thank you, Marvin. Thank you. Today I'm going to share with you our experience in scaling up disaster resilient housing microfinance in the Philippines. The next slide. We at Build Change started our work in the Philippines in late 2013. This is after Typhoon Yolanda devastated the country. This one of the most powerful tropical cyclones ever recorded in history. We were then concentrated mostly on post-disaster interventions, and our focus is really on building back more resilient, permanent housing in schools to protect them against the next typhoon. But years after, we realized that we ought to do more preventive programs because our goal is really to make houses disaster resilient before the next disaster strikes. Now, you may ask, why is there an urgent need for us to work in the Philippines? Simply stated, the Philippines has the highest disaster risk worldwide based in that 2023 assessment, the World Risk Index assessment, wherein the disaster risk of about 193 countries, covering all UN recognized countries and more than 99% of the world's population. And yet, the Philippines ranked first. The Philippines actually endures approximately 20 typhoons annually, of which around 4 to 6 makes landfall with devastating consequences. Uh, Further, we are to note that the landfalling typhoons now in the country have intensified around 15% when it comes to the proportion of storms of categories 4 and 5. It had doubled or tripled in number previous years. If that is not enough, the Philippines also has lies in the ring of fire. It's a belt of volcanoes circling the Pacific, and then we do have a lot of fault lines. Thus, we are also prone to seismic activity. From 2012 to 2022, you could see in the screen there were 8.1 million houses that were damaged due to meteorological services disasters, while around 215,000 on earthquakes. Having said that, we at Real Change really see the need to start working on preventive initiatives in the country. The next slide focuses on the prevention initiative on disaster resilient housing microfinance program. This is in partnership with the Philippine microfinance institutions. You could see there our existing partners. This aims to develop and implement an affordable, scalable, and sustainable financing product with allied technical services addressing the demand for resilient housing, specifically of the vulnerable and low-income households in the country. Now, why work with the MFIs and how huge is the market? With all those statistics that I mentioned before, there is an undeniable potential market for house strengthening for the Philippines, specifically for the most vulnerable. And this vulnerable population represents the economic segment that is served by the country's microfinance institutions. Housing microfinance is indeed gaining momentum in the Philippines, and it requires a needs-based or client-focused approach. The 2019 study that was commissioned by Build Change indicated about 8.6 million of the 15.6 million vulnerable units would need retrofitting or strengthening. This program is anchored really on Build Change's theory of change, similar to what my other colleagues have stated earlier, that to provide families with disaster resilient housing, the three major barriers which you see on your left side of the screen needs to be addressed. That is people, money, and technology. That is why there are three components. First, as you could see on the right topmost, there's the conduct of awareness raising activities. Second, the development of an appropriate financial product for disaster resilient housing. And the third is the development of the required technical resources that can be utilized by the different stakeholders that would be involved, such as the homeowners, the builders, and the partner MFI. Further, this program currently offers both house strengthening as well as new construction. The next slide tells us about the first barrier that we want to address that concerns people. Change always starts with people. Homeowners must want to make their homes safer. We at Build Change work to increase demand for resilient housing by raising awareness and helping the families really to take preventive measures before the next disaster strikes. We begin by involving homeowners so the designs, the solutions to improve their homes are really acceptable to them. The next slide shows some of the awareness raising modules that this program has developed. There you go. This program focuses on hazard assessment utilizing geospatial mapping, which was developed by the government. That's the Hazard Hunter Philippines. Further, you would see that there are modules that talk about the basic information about common natural hazards, disaster preparedness tips, and the emphasis on the importance of a resilient house on to mitigate this risk. We deliver this either face-to-face or through online platforms. The next slides will show you some of the awareness raising activities that we did with the communities. Further, you could see that we also are involved in training of trainers as well as on several caravans, awareness raising caravans that involves larger number of people. The next slide now talks on our intervention focusing on the barrier on money. If people don't have enough money to build a safer home, they won't. So an essential part of our work in Build Change in the Philippines is focused on widening the access to affordable and appropriate financing to build and strengthen resilient homes. We were the first country to start these initiatives in partnership with the microfinance institutions in 2018. Specifically in this case, we collaborate with the MFIs because they have the years of expertise in servicing the target low-income communities. In this program, we at Build Change provide our partner MFIs with the technical assistance and advisory services from end to end of the product development process, which means from conception product that we aim to develop is appropriate for the homeowner-driven construction, meaning that it takes into account the hazards that the homeowner is vulnerable to and the homeowner's demand, preference, and capacity to repay. Under this program, the partner MFI may opt to offer for strengthening of for new construction. Further, we provide flexibility for the homeowner to do improvements either one time or just like what most low-income families would do, it would be to improve or build their houses incrementally or in multiple phases. The next slide, on the other hand, addresses the concern on technology. We want to ensure that the right building designs and technology are available locally, is cost efficient and affordable, and would use existing culturally preferred technologies wherever possible. Build Change also recognizes the local technical capacity in each country that we work in. Therefore, in this project in the Philippines, we prioritize the builders who are from the communities and work to enhance their capacity. The next slide shows us the start of us leveraging Build Change's technical assistance platform. For this program, we have developed BCTAP. It's an end-to-end solution that enables efficient data processing. And as you could see in the screen, we start with collecting house assessment results. Further, this tool that we have developed could identify required house strengthening interventions and automatically prepare bill of quantities and would enable loan utilization check. So in this screen, the BC tab, as you could see there, have an assessment tool for the homeowners builders to evaluate the current structural health of the client's house. They could gather this information through a form that is filled out through a mobile phone device. The next slide is just a picture of the paper-based assessment form that contains detailed questions about the house's current structural status. This is a picture of the earliest version of the assessment tool. After we have tested it out in the field, pilot tested it, we continuously get feedback from our partner institutions as well as the builders on the usability of our tools. And what we have realized is that it would increase efficiency if we leverage on technology. On the next slide, once the builder or the microfinance officer filled up that part of the app that focuses on assessing the houses, the information can then be uploaded to a web application, which by the next slide will show you that the web application then generates a comprehensive list of actionable items essential for enhancing the house's resilience along with associated costs. So if the assessment part tells you the structural health, now the web application would tell you what are the scope of works necessary to make the houses resilient. The next slide, on the other hand, shows you the actual tool and an example of a list of recommended strengthening measures or the required scope of work. And as you could see, there are corresponding costs. If the capacity to repay of the client doesn't match the overall cost of the strengthening intervention, while the tool provides guidance to the homeowners on what to prioritize, the tool also provides flexibility for the homeowner to choose a specific scope of work. The next slide shows us the chosen scope of work. The tool also provides the bill of quantities. This itemizes the materials, labor, and similar costs related to the intervention needed. Also, a specific builder's guide can be printed to specify the important reminders and procedural guidance to do the strengthening correctly. Coupled with the loan provided by the MFI, the homeowner then embarks in the strengthening of homes. The next slide shows some examples of the contents of the builder's guide. As you could see there, that's an actual builder utilizing our builder's guide in the Philippines. The next slide shows Build Change, delivering the training modules that we have developed for local builders to build their capacity to correctly and efficiently implement the strengthening projects. The next slide focuses on BC-TAP's capacity to aid the microfinance institution for a loan utilization check feature. This would enable the microfinance officers to ensure that loan funds have been appropriately used for the intended purpose. This is done towards the end of the project as part of the loan process and documentation. The next two slides shows some of the designs that we do for our new construction. And as you could see, it has provisions for horizontal expansion as well. The next slide shares to you some stories, the before and after pictures of Miss Josefina Hagusojos. On the right side, you can see the before picture, and then this is after the intervention. We are proud to say that after the intervention, Miss Josefina Hagusojos feels more safer whenever a typhoon hits the area where she's currently residing. Further, it has a positive effect beyond just the shelter to the kids wherein they could now better study. The next homeowner that we would like to present to everyone today is Ms. Rosalinda Alcante. They have been a victim of the typhoon Goni years back, but even prior to that, they were dreaming of having a decent and safe house. With this program, in partnership with our local microfinance institution, they were able to strengthen their house. As you could see, the before picture is on the rightmost part, and this is their strengthened home being featured at this slide. Last but definitely not the least is Maria Bontimel. She was also a survivor of Typhoon Goni. She felt grateful with the chance to strengthen their house. They have long desired this for their family, especially for their kids. And right now, they have that sense of safety whenever a typhoon or a disaster comes. In the Philippines, definitely there would be more challenges that we would encounter as we scale up the project. It had been years since we first introduced it in the country, but as you could see, it had been replicated elsewhere in other geographies as well. What is important is that as we scale up, we always are grounded by the fact that we are based on a homeowner-driven construction. The people who are most vulnerable understands their needs and would need our collaborative efforts to assist them for them to have access to financing as well as technical resources moving forward, giving them a chance to have a disaster resilience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Girly. That's a very wonderful presentation from you. And it's really nice that we get to understand the importance of scaling up. And also it's very important to note that the three country programs that we've shown shows how each country program are in different states of scalability. Nepal is doing their study, understanding the market, and getting to know the preference and needs, while Indonesia has started implementing its pilot project, developed resources and sharing it with its partners. And we have the Philippines, who's already scaled up and is navigating through the house and helping partners to reach more people and build more safer house. So that's really very interesting, guys. Thank you so much for all the presentation and the insights that you've shared. We are now at the part of our question and answer for everyone. Earlier, I saw a question. Let me read it. Good presentation, Liva. You mentioned important aspects of program implementation. It should be started with seeking information. Aside from technical aspects such as understanding the cause of collapse or damages, it should be under consultation with the homeowners. We need to understand their preference and financial capacities. As you mentioned, financial institutions might potentially give their funding, but it seems an extra mile we should pursue. Banks prefer to give loans to new construction rather than incremental retrofitting to their cooperation due to their operation costs. So yeah, this is actually not a question, but a realization, and it's very true that we really have to understand the market first, understand the preferences, the wants, just so we could address them. At the end of the day, we want a holistic program that would go beyond housing and that would touch the lives of the people that we serve. So do we have other questions? Let me. So we have another question here. Hi, I am Mohon Kumar Mondal, working in an NGO named LEDARS or LEDARS. We want to build one model resilient house in the coastal area of Bangladesh as demonstration. Do you have any model what is suitable for the disaster prone area? Liva, Girly, Annie.
I can take the question if it's okay with Annie and Gurli. Hi, Mohan. Your question is, do we have any models? I mean, we have different models, like as Gurli mentioned in her presentation for Philippines, it's a very hazard prone area. We have designs that's suited for Philippines. We have designs that's suited for Colombia. We have designs that's suited for Indonesia, likewise Nepal. In terms of design, as I mentioned in my presentation as well, information collection is vital. And also, as part of the resilient housing design, it's important to understand the local context. Something that works for Nepal might not work for Bangladesh, or even if the hazard levels are the same, the homeowner preferences, the cultural preferences might be different. So answer to your questions, we do have different, disaster like resilient housing models for different areas. But again, these are specific to these areas. If you want something for Bangladesh, it should be more based on information collected from Bangladesh and based on the cultural preferences, the hazard levels for Bangladesh. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liva, for answering that question. I hope she was able to address your questions. And if you have other questions, just please type them in, and we'll try to answer them. I'm curious right now. I believe maybe Annie can help me with this. Annie, can you share more on any barriers in the adoption of resilient housing and home financing products that you've seen when you did your pilot projects in Indonesia?
Sure, Marvin. Thank you. So one of the example, the challenges that we face when we're implementing piloting of this program in Indonesia is the needs to have a safer home. It's not being prioritized instead of the other needs, such as especially for home related needs. It will be more on the expanding the house, or maybe like space adequacy, one thing, and then maybe like do some aesthetic improvement and having more rooms and things like that. So other than that, the other thing was what we were facing was some of the homeowners that we encountered. They usually would like to see a masonry house, and so when they only have like timber frame house or maybe confined masonry house but with timber at the upper part of the house, they would love to improve their house or replace their house to the full confined masonry instead of strengthening the ones that they have, because they see there's some paradigm in some of the areas in Indonesia that masonry house is more prestigious or more at a higher social level, and they perceive that non-masonry house is not good and is not sustainable. And that's one of the social paradigm. And the other thing that we also just found recently that even though we have some of the homeowners like already willing to improve the house, they were willing to do like a good construction quality. For instance, like they would like to use a good quality rebar instead of standard and substandard quality rebar. But once they bought the good quality rebar, and some of the voices from the neighbors says that they think the homeowner do too much. It's like and it's unnecessary action, and that sometimes discourages the community, the homeowners to do the right way. And so yes, I think that's one of the on the demand side. On the other hand, the barriers on the supply side, in this case, is the administrative barriers with the microfinance institution is that since we know that most financial institutions do not have the capability of conforming the quality of the construction, as well as sometimes they do not have the interest in it. And so there's no written standard procedure that they have to make sure that the loan being used according to the quality. So what they generally interest is usually just want to make sure that the loan being used to build maybe a roof or whatever that the homeowners were willing to do. But then in terms of quality, it's another case that they usually do not know how to check, or they don't want to check because it's gonna take time, and also do not have the experience in that. And so what we're doing in the piloting is that we work with MFI partner together to realize together the what kind of benefits that the MFI partner would have if they're gonna include or integrate the quality monitoring in their system. And so by the time they see that they see the benefit. So how we tackle the challenge is that they see the benefit of having quality monitoring. So that's because they know that when earthquakes happens or when disaster happens, usually the repayment become delay because the house were being damaged, and so like the homeowners or the members, like they were not able to pay anything because their money goes to repairing house or maybe things like that, or other damaged things that do the disaster. And they see that if the members are already able to build a good quality house, then the MFI partners see the potential that it will reduce the risk of having high debt of repayment by the members. So that's why they started to agree on putting some construction quality aspect to the agreement to the homeowners and things like that. So yeah, thank you, Marvin.
Thank you so much, Annie. It goes to show that there's a lot of things that we have to do in order to adopt or provide access for climate resilient housing. There's a lot of paradigm shifts, a lot of behavioral changes, non-technical and technical aspect wise, and a lot of things to be done. So thank you very much for sharing those. Leva, I believe there's a follow-up question for you. So let me read it. Will the climate resilient housing system be feasible for Bangladesh coastal areas in terms of rising sea level and frequent cyclones and high tides also? Leva?
Thank you, Nafis, for the question. So as I mentioned before, climate resilient housing system is a guiding principle that we use. Again, that principle might guide us to design a building in a certain way in Nepal, can, again, guide us to design a building in a different way in Philippines. It's all based on the local hazards that's available. Like you correctly mentioned, for Bangladesh's coastal area, there are certain, in terms of technical design of houses, there are certain features that or detailings that we use for coastal areas, so that there's less effect of corrosion in the rebars. If we're using an RCC system, if we're using something else, there might be other sort of guiding principles in the building code as well in terms of design, structural design. But then in terms of layout, in terms of architectural designs, in terms of what building materials the homeowners prefer, that is again based on the local cultural practices. And again, the rising sea level and frequent like cyclones, there are certain already sort of wind speeds that is included in the building code that you have to design for. So these will guide an engineer or a technical person on how we can, design a climate resilient housing system in a coastal area in Bangladesh. So yeah, so I mean, this again should be combined with the local preferences, as Arvind correctly mentioned. The homeowner preference, the local preference is again an important aspect, but also in this sort of disaster hazardous zones, again, the existing hazards such as sea levels, the cyclone, wind speeds, these are again important factors that you can design with the support of the existing building codes. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Viva. I'd also just like to add that providing access to climate resilient housing it's not a one size fits all. So you have to really understand the environment, your market, your partners, just to come up with a holistic program that would answer all these questions or these issues. Okay. Another question is for Girly. Girly, you mentioned a lot about the scale up that's happening in the Philippines, and you've had a lot of partners, MFI partners to be exact, in implementing the your programs, your resilient housing program. My question is, how is the repayment rate of the clients with your MFI partners?
The repayment rate really is impressive. It had proven the point that um, the poor, the vulnerable communities could really repay. Based on our years of testing the program in the Philippines, our repayment rate is at 98% and more. A caveat to that is that even includes when the pandemic hits. I guess this is primarily because um, everyone lives in their houses. Every day they are reminded that that house is part of the program. And as we have seen elsewhere in the globe, the vulnerable and low income population would really repay as long as you give them the opportunity to access financing, more so if it's for an investment that benefits them on a day to day basis and protects their family from harm.
Wow, that's very impressive. A 98% more of repayment rate is very impressive considering that if we want to replicate this into other areas. So I believe we don't have any more questions on our chat box. But again, if you have any questions, you can reach out to us. You can visit our website at www.buildchange.org, or you can send us emails. You can send emails at marvin@buildchange.org, through or to Leva@buildchange.org, to Annie@buildchange.org, or to Girly@buildchange.org. There. So for our closing remarks, I just like to share my key takeaways for this session, for today's session. number one is that with everything that's happening in the world and with climate change exacerbating the hazards and the frequency and the severity of these hazards, it's really very important that everybody works on providing access and increasing access to building climate and resilient housing programs. Second is that with the presentation that we've shown, with the lessons learned and the insights shared by my colleagues, it goes to show that resilient housing or climate and resilient housing initiatives are sustainable, adaptable, and scalable. In fact, we can even replicate them to different parts of the world and see the wonders that it could make. And lastly, it's very important that all of us work together. People from the government, people who does policy, people from financing institutions, MFIs, even the homeowners and the local builders. We all should work together to be able to create a program that builds a more safer house, that builds more safer communities, and in the future, a safer world. So I think with that, I end our discussion, our session, unless you guys have any questions for us. But then you can visit our website at www.buildchange.org, or you can reach out through our social media platforms at Build Change on Facebook and at Build Change on X or Twitter. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great day.